Welcome to Barndo Dreams.
There's a cooling trick that costs less than a dinner for two, takes a Saturday afternoon to install, and can drop the inside temperature of a metal barndominium by 10 to 15 degrees during the worst part of summer. It's not solar panels. It's not a mini split. It's not some miracle paint you saw on social media. It's been around for decades. Contractors know about it.
Why is it getting hotter
And almost
in here?
nobody building a barndo right now is using it correctly. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it is, why it works on metal buildings specifically, and, just as important, why it sometimes fails completely and leaves people more frustrated than when they started. Stick around, because the honest version of this story has a catch that almost every cheap cooling hack video conveniently leaves out. Before we get into it, if you're seriously looking into building a barndominium, off-grid home, or any kind of alternative structure, hit subscribe now. I break down real costs,
I'm so
real
excited about
failures,
this. It is
and real numbers
completely
on this
solar
channel.
powered. It keeps
No
the whole house
sugarcoating,
cool.
no sponsor fluff.
And this is the
You're
best
going to want
part.
that honesty
It's
for what's
so
coming
easy
in the
to
next 20
install.
minutes. Let's set the stage. Barndominiums have a heat problem that traditional stick-built homes don't deal with in the same way. You got a metal exterior shell, often a metal roof, sitting directly over conditioned living space. Metal absorbs radiant heat from the sun fast, and it transfers that heat into the structure fast too. On a 95-degree day in Texas or Tennessee, the surface temperature of an unshaded metal roof can climb past 150 degrees. That heat doesn't just sit on the roof. It radiates downward into the attic space. And if your insulation and ventilation aren't doing their job, it pushes straight into your living area. Most builders solve this with spray foam insulation under the roof deck, which works, but it's expensive. Often $8,000 to $14,000 for a typical barndo shell, depending on square footage and R value. Some people add mini-split systems in every room, which adds another $3,000 to $6,000 in equipment and installation. Both of those are legitimate solutions. Both of those also cost real money that a lot of people building on a tight budget simply don't have lying around in month 8 of a build that already went 20% over budget. So here's the question worth asking. Is there something cheaper that still makes a measurable difference? And the answer is yes, but only if you understand what it actually does and what it doesn't do. The $50 system is a combination of two things working together: a radiant barrier and a passive or low-power attic ventilation setup. Specifically, a gable or ridge-mounted thermostatically controlled attic fan paired with reflective barrier material stapled to the underside of the roof purlins or rafters. Here's the actual breakdown of cost, because I'm not going to throw out a number without showing you the math. A roll of perforated reflective radiant barrier foil, the kind rated for attic use, runs about $30 to $45 for a 500 square foot roll at most home improvement stores or online suppliers. A basic battery or solar-powered attic vent fan, not the hardwired kind, the simple solar-powered gable fan, runs anywhere from $40 to $70 for a small unit. If you're handy and already have a staple gun and a ladder, you can install the radiant barrier yourself in a weekend. The fan mounts into an existing gable vent opening with basic hand tools. Now, I said $50 in the title, and I want to be straight with you. That's the low end, assuming you already have a gable vent opening and you're doing the radiant barrier on a smaller structure, like a 500 to 800 square foot shop apartment or a small barndo. For a full-size, 2,000 square foot barndominium attic, you're more realistically looking at $150 to $250 total for materials if you do the labor yourself. I'm not going to pretend the title number stretches to every situation, because that's the kind of dishonesty that makes people lose trust in DIY advice. But even at $200, compared to an $8,000 spray foam job, this is still a massive gap. So why does this combination actually move the needle? Radiant barrier doesn't insulate the way fiberglass or foam does. It doesn't slow down conductive heat transfer through mass. What it does is reflect radiant heat, which is the dominant way heat moves through an open attic space under a metal roof. Studies from the Florida Solar Energy Center, which has tested this stuff more than almost anyone because of how brutal Florida summers are, found that radiant barriers can reduce attic heat gain by 30 to 40% in some conditions. That's not a marketing number. That's a measured number from an actual research institution testing actual attics. The fan part matters because radiant barrier alone just slows down how fast heat builds. it doesn't remove the heat that's already accumulated. An attic that hits 140 degrees by early afternoon is still going to push some of that heat downward eventually, barrier or not. A vent fan actively pulls hot air out of the attic space and replaces it with outside air, which on most days, even hot ones, is still cooler than a sealed attic under a metal roof. Combine the two, and you get a double effect. Less heat getting absorbed into the attic in the first place, and what is getting pulled out before it is time to soak into your ceiling insulation and radiate down into your living space. Now let's talk about what this actually translates to, because 30% less attic heat gain doesn't mean much to most people sitting in their living room sweating in July. In documented case studies and field tests, including some run by the Department of Energy's Oak Ridge National Laboratory, homes with radiant barrier and improved attic ventilation showed reductions in attic temperature of 15 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit compared to untreated attics on hot, sunny days. That's the attic, not the living space. The living space improvement is smaller, usually somewhere in the range of 3 to 8 degrees, depending on how well insulated the ceiling already is, how much air sealing exists between attic and living space, and how many hours of direct sun the roof gets. Here's where I have to be honest with you again. 3 to 8 degrees doesn't sound dramatic when you say it out loud, and it's not going to replace your air conditioner. If your AC is undersized or broken, this isn't fixing that problem. What it does do is reduce how hard your existing air conditioning has to work, which on a Barndo with a metal roof and minimal insulation can mean a real reduction in your cooling bill. Typically reported in the range of 10 to 20% reduction in summer cooling costs in homes that had poor attic insulation to begin with. If your Barndo already has spray foam and good insulation, the savings will be much smaller, sometimes barely noticeable, because you're not dealing with the same heat load problem in the first place. If this kind of real numbers breakdown is useful to you, drop a comment telling me what climate you're building in, humid, dry, 4-season, because the next section is going to matter a lot depending on where you live, and I want to know who's actually watching this so I can cover your specific situation in future videos. So if it's this cheap and the science backs it up, why isn't every Barndo builder doing this? There are a few honest reasons, and I'm not going to dodge any of them. First, contractors don't make money recommending $50 to $200 DIY fixes. If you're paying a contractor to frame and finish your Barndo, they're incentivized to sell you spray foam packages or full mini-split systems because those are bigger line items with bigger margins. A radiant barrier and a solar attic fan is something a homeowner installs themselves after the contractor's already left the job site, so it almost never gets mentioned during the build process. It's not a conspiracy, it's just how contracting margins work. Second, a lot of people don't know their attic space is accessible or vented properly to even take advantage of this. Some Barndo designs use a cathedral ceiling with no real attic cavity, where the metal roof sits directly against spray foam or rigid foam insulation with no air gap at all. In that case, a radiant barrier installed after the fact does almost nothing, because there's no attic airspace for it to reflect heat away from. You need to have planned for a vented air gap during construction, which most retrofit installs can add later without tearing into the roof assembly. Third, and this is the part most cheap fix videos online conveniently skip, in very humid climates, adding ventilation without managing moisture correctly can create condensation problems inside the attic, especially in shoulder seasons. If you're in a humid climate like the Gulf Coast or the Southeast, you need a radiant barrier that's designed to be vapor permeable, not a solid foil vapor barrier, where you risk trapping moisture and creating mold conditions inside your roof assembly. This is not a hypothetical. This is a documented issue that building science researchers have flagged specifically with radiant barrier retrofits done incorrectly in humid zones. So let's get specific about where this actually makes sense, because a $50 fix that works great in Arizona could be a bad idea in Louisiana if it's done wrong. If you're in a hot, dry climate, Texas Hill Country, Arizona, parts of New Mexico, Oklahoma, this combination is close to a no-brainer for an existing vented attic space. Low humidity means condensation risk is minimal, and the dry heat means radiant barrier performance is close to its best-case numbers. If you're in a hot, humid climate, you can still do this, but you need to choose a perforated, vapor-permeable radiant barrier specifically rated for humid applications, and you should pair it with a humidity-controlled or thermostatically gated attic fan rather than one that runs constantly, to avoid pulling excess moist outside air into the attic space during high humidity hours. If you've already got spray foam insulation directly under your roof deck with no attic airspace, this fix mostly doesn't apply to you in its cheap form. You need a different approach, and I'm not going to pretend a $50 fan fix is a building assembly that was designed without ventilation in mind. Let's talk about what installing this actually looks like, because there's a difference between you can do this yourself and this is easy for everyone. You're working in an attic space that, during summer, can already be 120 to 140 degrees before you even start working. That's a real safety consideration. Heat exhaustion in an attic is common enough that it's worth doing this kind of work early morning, wearing breathable clothing, and bringing more water than you think you need. Stapling radiant barrier overhead while balancing on rafters is also not a one-person job if you want it done safely. Most people doing this solo end up taking 2 to 3 times longer than they expect, and the risk of stepping through a ceiling because you missed a joist is a real, not exaggerated, risk. The solar attic fan installation itself is more straightforward if you already have a gable vent. It's typically a bracket mount job with basic wiring for a small DC motor. No electrician needed in most cases since it's solar-powered and self-contained. If you don't have an existing vent opening and need to cut one into your gable end, that's a different level of project, and at that point you're looking at either learning to safely cut and frame a vent opening yourself, or paying a contractor somewhere in the $300 to $600 range just for that portion, which obviously changes the math on this being a $50 fix. So here's my honest take after laying all of this out. This is a legitimate, well-documented, low-cost improvement. Not a myth, not a gimmick. The science behind radiant barriers and attic ventilation is solid, backed by real research from real institutions, not influencer claims. But it is not a replacement for proper insulation. It is not a fix for an undersized air conditioning system. And it is not a one-size-fits-all solution across every climate and every Barndo design. If I'm building a Barndo on a budget right now, in a hot climate, with a standard vented attic, I'm doing this in the first month, no question. It's one of the best dollar-for-dollar cooling improvements available, and the payback period on the cooling bill savings alone is usually under 2 years. But I'm not telling you it'll turn your Barndo into an Arctic retreat, and I'm not telling you it works the same way in every single setup, because that kind of oversimplified claim is exactly the kind of misleading content that gives the alternative housing space a bad reputation. If you found this useful, the best thing you can do is subscribe, because I'm planning a full breakdown next on spray foam versus traditional insulation costs and barndominiums, with real contractor quotes from 3 different states, and you're going to want the numbers on that one too. Drop a comment with your climate zone and your current attic setup, vented or unvented, foam or fiberglass, because I read every comment and it shapes what I cover next. Thanks for watching all the way through. I'll see you in the next one.